La clínica del Dr. David Cavazos, el quiropráctico oficial de Cali Lucha Libre, presenta. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Gali Lucha Libre Intermission. We have today León de Oro, one of the heavyweights of Gali Lucha Libre. León de Oro, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Now that you're on, it's super. I can't wait to chat with you and to get to know you a little bit better. And so the fans that have been asking for this interview for a long, long time, finally, I guess, everything got together. Your agent, our agent, the production department, and all the permits, they're all up. So we got you on, Leon.
Well, thanks for having me, man.
All right, so let's start with the name León de Oro. What a catchy name!
Well, that name actually it translates to Golden Lion in English, and I actually came up with that after my first couple of matches with Gali Lucha. I actually was gonna go by Bronzed One at first, but it got kind of there was a little loss in translation, and I was called Branded One, and I was like, that's not me. So I tapped into the past, my past to help with my future, and my alma mater is UAPB, which is a historically Black college university in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and their team name is the Golden Lions, and I was like, I can call myself Golden Lion, but instead of using the English version, I figured, since I'm in a Lucha Libre promotion too, I wanted to pay a little bit of a tribute, as well as being different, because there was so many. There's Golden Star, there's Golden Dragon, it's Golden this, Golden that. Yeah, so so on and so forth. So I just I said, well, let's go a little bit different. Why not León de Oro?
León de Oro, and it clicked.
Yes, it definitely did. I love the name. I'm glad that I was able to use it there in Gali thus far.
The name León de Oro and your style, you all forward, you all 4x4, 6x6, if you may. If there's such a thing, there's such a thing, 6x6, and then when you go on the ring, it's no playing around. It just, I'm here to roar, and I better roar like Oro.
Yeah, and plus, I figure, since I'm a Leo, that's the tattoo on my left arm, and so I figured, as a wrestler, why not just be the king of the jungle, be the lion, be El León,
I like
as
that.
we would say in Spanish. And
I like that.
I wanted to have that style, to be straightforward, not play around, because that's something I was conditioned in whenever I was in every other athletic endeavor, such as basketball and football and baseball. I had to be serious. I couldn't be too goofy in those sports. And I know pro wrestling is a bit different in that regard, but for me personally, I tried the comedy parts and goofy parts earlier in my career. It didn't work so well for me. It wasn't me, and it wasn't it wasn't realistic for me as myself as a performer to do.
More like credible will be a proper word to utilize on that, if I may say so. How does this passion that you've shown us as León de Oro and as a professional wrestler came upon?
Well, we'd have to go back to my own childhood in Arkansas. At 3 or 4 years old, I first started watching wrestling, and what I liked about it was different from everything else I've ever seen. Like when you watch other sports interviews, they sound more monotone. They don't display as much personality. They're not talking smack like they would in wrestling. You know, in wrestling, the interviews, the way they would talk smack to each other, and they wouldn't even curse it out. It was some of it was like intelligent rants, and that kind of grabbed me. Like even the over the top personas like Flair, even he had a more of a he had a more intelligent rant too. Even his was at least halfway intelligent. So it's like, wow, you can talk smack like this and in interviews. You don't see that in other sports mostly. So
Yeah,
that grabbed me.
Rick, you're talking about the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, right?
Absolutely.
There's along with Ric Flair, there's some of his fellow wrestlers from that era that could really talk the talk, walk the walk, like he says, and talk smack and be entertaining with his his moves and his drops and his famous whoa after every few sentences. And that Ric Flair, that when you were watching at 3-4 years old, aside from Rick, who else did you say, oh wow, I like the way this guy talks smack, more or less?
There was a lot of them. There was Junkyard Dog. There was Iron Sheik. That's another one. Iron Sheik, who I actually got to meet years ago. And who else? There's Stan Hansen. Stan Hansen. There's Paul Orndorff and Skandar
Oh,
Akbar,
you're
who
going
was
back.
yeah. Oh, there's
You're
guys
going
like
back.
Skandar Akbar down in Texas, who I think he passed away a few years ago. He was one of the major ones in the territory I was watching, which was Bill Watts' promotion, and or guys like Michael Hayes, who I got to meet in backstage in WWE a few years ago, and yeah, quite a few of the guys from the late '70s, early '80s.
The American Dream, Dusty Rose,
and him, definitely him.
he
His
was a
rap was his rap was very good as a babyface.
yeah, he was good, especially with all those moves and the elbow and the twirling and coming around. I mean, it's so entertaining to watch those folks or those wrestlers that you mentioned and to move forward to today. People or wrestlers like you, performance like you bring something to the game that every time I get to broadcast or do the play-by-play about one of your luchas, there's something about you. You're muscular, you're big, and you're agile. You can move, with all due respect.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I didn't want to have too much muscle to where I wouldn't be as mobile. I could have gotten a 250 or 260 even at this height, but since I'm just under 6 foot, and that height, if I were taller, I'd try to get to 250 or 260, but as it is, 240 was the most I can get to and be able to move and be able to be halfway limber. And I always there's a lot of stuff that I can do that I haven't shown yet, but in future shows you'll see them.
Oh man, that's a tease. You know I'm going to be watching. You know I'm going to be watching behind that
Oh, you'll be there.
microphone and behind that camera. Oh, I'll go.
You got a
That's
ringside seat.
that's a good one. Oh man, that's quite a tease. I'm up for it. I'm up for it. I'll be expecting those moves. I'm not going to tell you what they are because it won't be a surprise. Now, leaving that aside, Leon de Oro, what that robe or robes that you wear, they're, aside from your personality, they're quite catchy. They're quite eye candy, if you may, to when you come out to your theme music. Can you talk about those robes they're not inexpensive. They're probably expensive as all get out.
They actually are surprised. They actually can be. They're fairly expensive, but a lot cheaper than I thought they would be. I've at least paid up to anywhere from 200 to 300 per pop. I thought it would be up to 1,000 with the designs I've wanted to have on there, but it's, I've been able to get some discounts on them. I seen when I looked around the area wherever I've been in the wrestling biz, no one has been really. There's only a few people that have been wearing robes anymore. So I think when I started, when I was wearing the robes, people were like, I was getting a lot of compliments on them, and it looked to be as if I was standing out because of those. So I figured, okay, because at one point I wanted to get rid of them, but I'm like, well, heck, no one else is wearing them, so why not just keep wearing them? And there's actually a history behind how wrestlers historically started wearing robes. Would you like to hear it?
Oh, of course.
Okay. Actually, it was with the history behind it. The reasoning behind wearing robes was to have an advantage over your opponents, where you keep your body warmed up. When your body is warm, you have more of an advantage over your opponent. So that was one thing I looked up as the history of wearing robes, and that was the original reasoning behind it. But by the time we started watching wrestling, like maybe back in like from the 50s or 60s, which was like the first decade of televised wrestling, on through up to even currently, it just became a thing. It just became, that's just what you do. That was just what you do as a professional wrestler at that time. So that was the original reasoning I gave you, plus, versus what the reason is, back 30 or 40 years ago to now.
Interesting. Aside from we were talking very briefly in regards to the Ric Flair era, that he wore those robes and everything about him when he strut, because the guy strut to the ring and with his music and his strutting, and then when he everybody knows, so comparing one to the other one, not only their visual eye catchers, eye candy, and also a lot of people, a lot of wrestlers cannot wear a robe the way the Ric Flairs do now on the modern era, like you do, and some others that, I mean, I can put on a robe. I mean, gold, silver, platinum, whatever, but I probably will fall flat on my face. But you have to wear them into a style of your own. In this case, Leon de Oro.
Absolutely. There were actually a lot of quite a few guys who wore robes back in even as recently as probably about the 80s. There was Greg Valentine.
Mm-hmm.
He had some beautiful robes. He and Flair actually had the same designer, who was the late Mr. Wrestling 2, aka Johnny Walker's wife Olivia, made those robes for her husband, Mr. Wrestling 2, Greg Valentine, and of course Ric Flair. And those weren't cheap. Those were thousands of bucks. Those are like, at the very least, probably about 2,000 a pop. And Paul Orndorff, actually, he wore his robes when he went to the WWF. And with some of the wrestler stories, like from Jericho and guys like Bobby Roode, he would suggest to him to wear ring robes. And thankfully, he hasn't come across me and had to suggest that to me. I've already been ahead of that. So if he sees me in the dressing room and says, wear a robe, I'm like, I'm already on it, Paul.
How would you compare León de Oro, Lucha Libre, uh, to regular wrestling, like the WWF, the WWE, to Lucha Libre in its own?
Lucha Libre is a style of its own, and it's actually historically more exciting than what you would see in American wrestling. Period, especially WWE. That's why it's being implemented to some degree everywhere here in the United States. It's the first person that I saw was Rey Mysterio.
Oh yeah.
As far as using the lucha style, and that was like the conduit to watching everybody else in Lucha Libre. It's a different style. I've actually been able to use a little bit of it before with a guy that I wrestled in Louisville, Kentucky, named Randy Torres, and he's down in Texas, and he's very experienced in the lucha style, and he's training guys in Texas right now. I think in El Paso, where he was from, and that was one of my best matches in Louisville when I was wrestling for Ohio Valley Wrestling.
Would you say, now that you touched your matches, what had been the most competitive match that you have had up to now that you will look back and say, wow, that was really good?
Wow, there's quite a few. Randy Torres is one of them. That was one of my best matches I've had. The most recent one I had, besides Ricky Cruz, that's one. My first match in Galley Lucha. My most recent match with Jake Painter was seemed like one of my best competitive matches.
When you're on your way to the ring and you hear your theme song, do you? I have to ask. This is like a textbook question that I ask your colleagues. Do you still get butterflies?
Sometimes I do, but it would depend on where I'm at. I know I did one of the first times I wrestled for Galley. I did, because it was my first time regularly wrestling in Chicago. Trying to think, another time was in Western Pennsylvania, my first match there. When it's my first time somewhere, the butterflies are going to be endless. But after about maybe the second time, the butterflies will still be there, but not as prevalent.
Not as frequent, or oh, okay. That's a pretty good answer. Does the crowds or the public, do you hear them, or do you go into a zone? You know how some athletes go into that zone and it's all business like you are, but do you still hear the crowd?
Yes, I do. I've felt like I've had to, so that I can gauge their reactions and act accordingly with whatever I'm doing in the ring. So I try to balance it out. Yeah, I'm in the zone on one point, but then again on another point, yes, I'm listening to the crowd, because I've learned that it's very important to do so, and I've been conditioned that way to listen to the crowd, listen to what they're reacting to, and work accordingly. And yeah, I try to balance it out. That's actually been kind of like how I've tried to live my life, is trying to balance everything out for myself.
Speaking of balance, do you obviously have an exercise routine that you follow, And do you follow a diet as well? And how often do you train or
Well,
exercise?
I used to train 4 days a week. I actually reduced it to 3. But I've tried to balance my diet too. I've never really had a strict diet, believe it or not. And I've only tightened up in the last 2 years, or maybe even less than that. I've only tightened up in the last maybe year and a half to 2 years, because I relied on my genetics for so long. And I used to eat quite a bit and didn't really gain weight. But when I started being able to gain weight and muscle, I've had to cut down on portions a little bit more. That's
And the
still a
good
work in progress.
and the goodies.
Yes.
What
Uh,
advice I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say that yeah, you can eat whatever you want. Just it's more so about portions than anything else.
But a lot of times that portion or that particular thing is so good that it's like that old commercial. You can eat just one. You gotta eat them.
Exactly.
And I don't want to mention brands because they're not paying me for that. What advice would you give the young comers that are getting into the business, or suggestions from León de Oro?
For anyone who is aspiring to even just be in the wrestling ring, or if they're in and they're just starting out, I would say learn the basics. Um, Learn who you are, and there's actually and try to seek out pick whatever legends bring that you can, because you as long as you're in the wrestling business, this is an overall point. As long as you're in the wrestling business, you will never stop learning. And no matter how long you're going to be in it, it's constantly changing. The world constantly changes, and professional wrestling mirrors the world. So just like the world constantly changes, there's always going to be new technology, always going to be new things coming on the horizon. Pro wrestling is the same way. There's always going to be a new move, a new style, a new way of promoting, a new way of doing stuff. It's just like society, the world at large, it's always changing. So if you think you know everything, you might want to get out. And it's the same way with life. If you think you know everything, then you're not living. Learning is living. And that's
That's
the
true.
overall point I would give to the younger guys coming up. Learning is living, and you'll never stop learning as long as you're in professional wrestling.
Wow, those are wise words. Your social media for people that are watching this interview and Gali Lucha Libre intermission. Would you like to share them so they get to know who León de Oro is, get in touch with you, or learn more about León de Oro?
I'm on Twitter at León de Oro 1976, and I'm on Facebook, and the page is Linux Leon. So those are the only social media outlets that I'm on. I have no Instagram or anything else. It's just strictly been Facebook and Twitter.
Good. I want to thank you, León de Oro, for taking the time to talk to us and the fans that wanted to learn more about León de Oro. We wish you nothing but the best in your future. And I'll be watching. I'll be watching. It's a promise. It's not a threat. It's a promise for those moves that you said you had. I'll be watching now every time León de Oro graces with his presence. Thank you very much. And you have yourself a wonderful afternoon, wonderful day. And thanks again.
Thank you.